How often do deaths that appear to be from natural causes turn out to be poisonings? How many husbands of one woman can die before the authorities become suspicious? These are the questions that arise when you explore the stories of Black Widow serial killers. Lyda Southard was born Lyda Trueblood in 1893. Her fifth husband was a man named Paul Vincent Southard, who quickly divorced his wife after she was arrested for murdering her four previous husbands. He probably saw all the pieces of the puzzle fall into place, as she'd been pushing him to take out a life insurance policy worth around $10,000 when she was arrested. Lyda's first husband was Robert Dooley, and his official cause of death was typhoid. That wasn't uncommon for the time, but when the same illness also supposedly took their child, people started to become suspicious, including Robert's brother, Edward, Lyda's next three husbands, and the life insurance companies. By the time law enforcement went to talk to Lyda, she'd already absconded to Hawaii and hooked up with Paul Southard. Investigators exhumed the bodies of the deceased men and determined that they'd all been killed by arsenic. Lyda was arrested in 1921. 10 years later, she escaped and went on to marry husband number 6, Harry Whitlock. He survived, though, and had their marriage annulled when she was arrested again. Lyda was ultimately released into the custody of her sister in 1941. The trial of Chisako Kakehi was one of the longest in Japanese history, as well as one of the most terrifying, especially to those with elderly relatives. Kakehi first married in 1969, and that 25-year union came to an end with the 1994 death of her husband from natural causes. Then in 2007, she started using a matchmaking agency to be paired with available men, who would invariably end up dead.
Police say in the last 20 years, at least 5 of Kakehi's partners have died, including all 4 of her husbands.
Kakehi's first victim actually survived. He was poisoned with a cyanide capsule, but he managed to just pull through at the hospital. In 2012, she was planning to marry a man who later died in a motorcycle accident after mysteriously losing consciousness. And then by 2013, she was talking about marrying once again to another man, only this time the cyanide capsule did the job. A few months later, she married again, and after this husband died from a massive cardiopulmonary episode, people got suspicious. When an autopsy turned up cyanide, Kakehi was arrested. In 2017, she was sentenced to death, and in 2021, the Supreme Court of Japan upheld the death penalty ruling. When Judy Buenoano was sent to Florida's electric chair in 1998, she had the dubious honor of being the first woman to be executed there since 1848. In 1983, Buenoano made an attempt on her fiancé John Gentry's life. He had a $500,000 life insurance policy taken out on him, and luckily his exploding car failed to kill him. That attempted murder drew attention to Buenoano, and investigators realized that the name of their chief suspect meant Goodyear in Spanish. It turned out Judy had legally changed her last name from that of her late husband, James Goodyear, who died in 1971 under suspicious circumstances. Thus kicked off an investigation that confirmed James Goodyear had died of arsenic poisoning. Also dead was their son, Michael. He became paralyzed when the arsenic failed to kill him, so Buenoano took him canoeing where he drowned. She was also connected to the death of a boyfriend named Bobby Joe Morris. He died in 1978 after showing symptoms of arsenic poisoning, allowing Buenoano to collect on 3 insurance policies. It's not entirely clear how many men Belle Gunness murdered, but when law enforcement finally started digging in the pen where she kept her pigs, they found the remains of at least 12 bodies. Gunness's time as a Black Widow began on July 30th, 1900. Prior to that, she was implicated in the suspicious deaths of 2 of her children. But July 30th wasn't just the day her husband supposedly died of heart failure. It was also the only day he had 2 life insurance policies active at the same time, as one was about to expire and the other was just beginning. After his death, Gunness moved, remarried, and killed again. She claimed that this victim had been reaching for something on her stove when he caught on fire and died from his burns. Gunness then began taking out personal ads in newspapers. If a man came to meet her, he invariably disappeared. The final one was named Andrew Helgelian. When he went missing, his brother raised the alarm, so Gunness decided she needed to do something rash. After her house burned down, the diminutive remains found in the wreckage that were assumed to be hers didn't seem to match her tall stature, but law enforcement determined that it was close enough. Mary Elizabeth Wilson earned herself the nickname the Merry Widow of Windy Nook as her husbands kept dying, and she remained predictably cheery about it. She was, after all, the one killing them, and she wasn't shy about it either. As recounted by the BBC, during one of her weddings, when asked what she was going to do with all of the food that was left over, she answered, "We'll keep them for the funeral." That's the sort of thing that can lead to gossip. Eventually, law enforcement became suspicious enough to exhume 2 of Wilson's 4 short-lived husbands. It was in 1957, and she didn't seem to take into account recent advances in forensic sciences when she told reporters, "I'm not worried about what they are saying. I can go to the Blessed Sacrament. I am a Catholic." Wilson may have been counting on the church's forgiveness, but the law was less forgiving. All 4 of her husbands ultimately showed signs of phosphorus poisoning, which had come from a widely available rat poisoning. She was found guilty and sentenced to hang, though a last-minute reprieve saw her facing life in prison. She died in 1963. Nannie Doss is an undeniably fascinating person. Born Nancy Hazel in 1906, she was known as Nannie by the time she could walk. That's about the same time she suffered a head injury that would be later blamed for her tendency to kill her husbands. Her murderous habits were also blamed on her voracious appetite for romance novels. Whatever the reason, she started killing while she was with her first husband, Charles Braggs, who sensed something fishy. After the mysterious deaths of 2 of their daughters, he left and divorced her. Doss was married to her second husband for 16 years, before killing him with a dose of rat poison after killing off a few grandchildren in the meantime. She married husband number 3 2 days after they met. By the time he died with symptoms suspiciously reminiscent of poisoning, she had already made sure everyone in town liked her more than him. The house he left to his sister burned down as Doss left, and she went to stay with her mother-in-law and later her sister, both of whom died suddenly while she was with them. In due time, she remarried and took care of husband number 4 with more rat poison. When 5th husband Samuel Doss died suddenly, an autopsy turned up traces of arsenic in his stomach. After Nannie Doss confessed to police and her other former husbands were exhumed, the evidence they found was enough to put her away for life. Things started going sideways for Betty Lou Beets in 1985 when the bodies of both her 4th and 5th husbands were found buried on her property. Both men had been shot and killed, and she was ultimately sentenced to death. The verdict came in despite claims that Beets had been acting in self-defense and had been physically abused by both husbands. Beets first married when she was just 15, and that rocky relationship ended in 1969. The next year, she married her second husband, though that union lasted 2 years and ended in divorce when she shot and wounded him after he broke her nose. She married husband number 3 in 1978 and tried to kill him a year later. That was the same year she married Doyle Wayne Baker. When Beets was executed in 2000, it was witnessed by the sons of the 2 men she'd killed, including her 5th husband's son, Jamie. As Jamie told CBS, "I just kind of focused on my dad. I seen my dad's face. I knew that he was smiling and it was over now." When Betty Neumar died in 2011, she was 79 years old. The official cause was cancer, but she was so reviled by the families of her long-dead husbands that some didn't even believe she was truly dead. Neumar had quite the track record of spouses with suspicious deaths. Her first husband was Clarence Malone, though they'd been divorced for nearly 2 decades when he was shot and killed in 1970. Long before that, Neumar had already moved on to her second husband, James Flynn. He died in 1955, and she told 2 entirely different stories about his demise. In one version, he froze to death in his truck, and in the other, he was shot and killed. Neumar was arguably with her third husband when he was killed in 1967, though she was able to convince law enforcement that he'd shot himself. Evidence collected at the time suggested that he'd been shot twice. Fourth husband Harold Gentry died in 1986 after being shot 6 times. It was his death that finally got her arrested. She wasn't charged with murder, but with solicitation to commit murder, and even that charge took 2 decades to stick. Neumar's 5th husband died of a sudden onset of sepsis. He was immediately cremated, but this didn't stop investigators from noting that blood poisoning can present symptoms similar to arsenic poisoning. Neumar maintained her innocence in all cases.
She is slick. She should be a lawyer. She's so darn slick.
Mary Ann Cotton was in the midst of death and tragedy almost from the day she was born in 1832. Despite that, she seemed to have a promising career ahead of her, first as a nurse and then as a dressmaker. But by 1864, 6 of her 9 children were dead. It's possible that she killed some or all of them, though the following year she committed her first known murder when she killed her first husband, William Mowbray. Cotton collected on his insurance policy, and by the time she married her second husband, George Ward, 2 more of her children were dead. Ward died in 1866, and Cotton's next husband, James Robinson, booted her out of the house when he caught her stealing money and pawning his possessions. Then came widower Frederick Cotton, who died mysteriously in 1871, followed by Joseph Natras, who died in 1872. More and more of Cotton's children and stepchildren died along the way. It wasn't until she told a parish official that another stepson would soon, quote, go like all the rest, that these deaths were investigated in earnest. She went on trial in March of 1873, was found guilty, and was hanged the same month. Catherine Flannagan and Margaret Higgins were sisters living in the slums of Victorian-era Liverpool. At that time, one of the ultimate insults of a life of poverty was considered the indignity of a pauper's burial. In order to give even the poorest of England's residents a chance at a decent burial, so-called burial societies were set up. It was basically insurance, as customers would contribute a few pence at a time, and when someone died, the money in the accounts would be used to pay for their funeral. Flannagan and Higgins realized that if enough people close to them who had joined a burial society died and they kept those funerals cheap, they could rake in scores of cash. It was the murder of Margaret's husband Thomas Higgins that eventually got the sisters hanged, but their murder for money scheme went way beyond that. Thomas's daughter Mary died about a month after he and Margaret were married, and when he also died, his brother pushed for an investigation. 3 bodies were exhumed, examined, and found to have died from arsenic overdoses. The recipients of their insurance policies and burial society money were, of course, Catherine Flannagan and Margaret Higgins. It's estimated that they killed around 17 people before their execution in 1884. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about true crime are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.